next stop of my journey is Belgium. In 1916, the Belgians took colonial control of Rwanda from the Germans. During World War I, Rwanda's King Musinga gave 1,000 Rwandan troops to the Germans to fight against the Belgians. But the Belgians won the war and took control of Rwanda under the mandate of the League of Nations. They kept Musinga as king, but stripped him of almost all authority. Systematically, they extended division between Tutsi and Hutu, according to the Hamitic myth the Germans had brought to Rwanda.
Reclaiming history.
1 million people were murdered in just 100 days. My parents and a big part of my family were killed. My name is Samuel Ishimwe. I'm a filmmaker. I'm on a journey to find out about the colonial roots of the 1994 genocide against the Tutsi in Rwanda. Dante Singiza, a Rwandan historian, researches in Belgium about the colonial rule in Rwanda.
Est-ce que vraiment les Tutsis, ce sont eux qui avaient opprimé les Hutus?
Le vrai responsable de l'écartement du pouvoir des Hutus, donc de l'écartement au pouvoir, de l'écartement des privilèges du pays, ce ne sont pas les chefs Tutsis ou bien le monarque qui était là, le monarque du Rwanda, mais c'est plutôt l'administration, à ce moment-là, c'est l'administration mandataire belge.
Dantes shows me documents from the colonial administration that prove how Belgians imposed racist politics in Rwanda. First, they favored the Tutsi and marginalized the Hutu. From 1928 on, only Tutsi could become chiefs. All Hutu chiefs were replaced by Tutsis.
Puisse remplacer son Hutu par un Tutsi intelligent.
I know we have huge responsibilities as Rwandans in hating each other and getting to the genocide. We did it. We did that. The genocide, we the Rwandans did it. Nobody else came to do it. But hate and the ideology of hate is something that is really, it's an idea that is built and cultivated, especially in the Belgian colonial time. I really want to see for myself how real it is and to see if I can have a conviction for myself that this is really something that was put in place and really pitted people against each other. The divide and rule, as people call it.
The dossier from the 20s that Dante showed us, there's a correspondence between the resident and the colonial administrator, talking about a chief they have to remove because he's Hutu, pretty much. That was in the 20s. Because he's not intelligent, he said, we should replace him by a Tutsi. This is, I think, the moment where they really changed the traditional way Rwanda was governed.
In 1931, the Belgians deposed King Musinga, who refused to be baptized and worked closer with the Belgians. His son took over.
This is the dossier about the removal of Musinga. His son, who became king after him, he speaks good French and he's becoming closer and closer to Europeans than his father. So he's a good candidate to replace his father.
In 1932, Belgium introduced an identity card that cemented the racial division. From now on, you are permanently either Tutsi, Hutu, or Twa.
It was a dynamic thing. Musinga could make somebody from Hutu to Tutsi. It was a moving thing. Now, the identity card, you can't change it now.
The race.
Tutsi. I want to see the card. In this card, they show Hutus as if they live separately from Tutsis. Complete nonsense.
I take a look at the African Museum in Tervuren, which used to be the showcase of Belgian colonialism. Today, it wants to transform into a center for exchanging ideas with the former colonies Rwanda, Congo, and Burundi.
Leopold II created this building, and he needed this apparatus of colonial propaganda to convey this message to Belgian public that everything was okay and that Belgium was bringing civilization.
Do people know about that bloody side of the history in terms of the public? Or do you think there is a need to do more? And if there is a need to do more, do you think there's an acceptance for that change to contextualize all this, to know where all this came from?
Well, the colonial propaganda and the Tervuren Museum helped to create this rosary image of the colony. So this was long hidden for the public. I think it really changed in the 1980s. But still, there's a lot of work to be done because new generations need also to be informed about this. We talk about genocide in Rwanda, we talk about genocide in Sarajevo, but we don't talk about genocide in Congo during Leopold II. This term is also always avoided.
What would you understand if you visited here? Nothing. If you don't know nothing about Rwanda, there's nothing that you could learn here. Apart from, you see a 1-minute video of the Belgian king visiting Rwanda, saying hi, and then you see a few newspapers in the 50s. And, there's nothing that talks about the segregationist policy that the Belgians imposed in Rwanda. So it doesn't really teach anything. It's just, it's like in the bedroom where you have, when you have posters of it. It doesn't teach nothing.
At the same time, downstairs at the museum, a Burundian artist is setting up a new exhibition that proves how it's possible to confront the past.
We have thousands of images in the museum, images which have been taken in Africa, mostly in Congo, Rwanda, Burundi. And my project is called My Name is Nobody.
My name is Nobody.
Yes, because looking at the pictures, I found that no African had a name on the pictures. The photographers were deciding who were the people in front of them.
Right.
We were exhibited, or we were taken, or we were assigned to identities. Tutsi are very tall, the Pygmies are very, the Bantus are this or that, and that's the words you find today on Twitter or on internet. People, qualifying themselves, like it was decided in these pictures, how the stereotypes became reality. That's my artistic work. But this time I didn't make pictures, I took pictures from the museum. Now I'm gonna show them using these keywords, showing how absurd the description of the people was.
One of the projects you did before this one, Musinga tribes, it was kind of like reversing the roles.
So Musinga tribes, it's a story which talks about a 70s lab by black and white people created in Brussels. You have all the story in it, and people believe it.
We always see the pictures of in Rwanda, people measuring, white people measuring. Somehow in the imagery, it sounds like a normal thing, or it's like, it's okay. But when you see a white person doing it, it's like, oh, wait a minute.
Exactly.
Something's very wrong here.
And actually, that was the reaction of the public.
Yes.
Touching the white body like that today is still shocking. So it's all about what we're talking about. The story of the ethnical troubles, the genocide and the rest, came from a fake news. Came from a fake news that people believed, and they went so far that they killed each other.
Yeah.
And some people still think that people are different.
Yes.
Yeah.
Yes.
In Brussels, I get the feeling that Belgium still has trouble facing its history. In 2020, a special parliamentary commission was set up to shed light on Belgium's colonial past. After 2.5 years, it collapsed at the finish line, stripped off all its recommendations. There was no political consensus to apologize to the victims. I meet Wouter de Vriend, who led the commission.
I guess in many countries, an apology is an act of vulnerability. So in fact, you have to be brave in order to apologize. And for many political parties in Belgium, an apology is quite logical. For me, for instance, I always was in favor of an official apology. But there was pressure from the presidents of the political parties in Belgium, also from the monarchy in Belgium. Some of the political parties who initially agreed on an official apology withdrew their support for that. And that meant, in fact, that, the commission didn't come to an end.
During your commission research on the colonial past of Belgium, in regards to Rwanda, what were the findings that really, what was the most shocking or interesting to you that you found?
Well, for the members of the commission, it's quite clear that Belgium played a role in making more explicit the racial differences and the ethnic background of the people living in Rwanda at the time. Hutu, Tutsi, Twa.
Until the late 50s, the Belgian anthropologist Jean Hirno was measuring Rwandans to prove they are separate races. At the time, as in many African countries, the calls for an end of colonization became stronger. The Tutsi leadership in Rwanda also wanted Belgium to end its colonial rule.
Belgium resisted against, let's say, an uprising nationalism of merely the Tutsi elite in Rwanda at the time. And they began to discriminate, and they began to, let's say, support the Hutu people in Rwanda. Just for their own purpose, actually, in their own interest as a colonial power.
In 1959, Gregoire Kayibanda, a Hutu nationalist, led what he called the Hutu Revolution. It culminated in violence that exiled more than 100,000 Tutsis to neighboring countries. In 1961, the Tutsi monarchy was abolished. After a referendum, Rwanda became a Hutu-dominated republic and received its independence from Belgium in 1962. Kayibanda became the first president. His government excluded the Tutsi from any political and military power.
And of course, the roots of the ethnic conflict that caused the genocide in Rwanda lay partially in Belgian colonial reign in Rwanda.
In 1973, Kayibanda was removed from power by his army chief, General Juvenal Habyarimana, who promised peace for the Tutsi minority. But instead, he excluded the Tutsi even more from education and public service. The number of Tutsi refugees in neighboring countries was growing, and Habyarimana refused their right to return home. From the independence in 1962 to the genocide against the Tutsi in 1994, the Rwandan government kept the ethnicities Hutu, Tutsi, Twa in the identity cards and many other official documents.
Reclaiming history.
In part 7, Sam returns to Rwanda to understand how Rwandans live together now. Victims, perpetrators, and bystanders. Knowing that the division started in colonial times, he wants to understand how the wounds of the genocide can be healed and Rwandans can live together in the future.